Good evening. I have the clock being 6 p.m. So with that, I will welcome you all to Budget 2022, and I'll call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, December 1st of 2022. I'll begin with reading the land proclamation. Give me one moment here. We are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6 and the Métis homeland. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. The peace treaties bind us all. Next on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. I understand we have administration has a couple of suggested amendments for tonight's consideration. Ms. Winter, could you display the motion for the adoption of the agenda and explain the proposed amendments, please, on the screen when you have a moment? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Administration has the suggested amendments to the meeting this evening. Administration is asking that Council consider scheduling item 5A, the Beaumont Library 2020 annual report, to start at 6:20 p.m. and that after following the annual report that we go in and add the organizational chart review to follow after. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a member of council willing to move the adoption of the agenda as amended? Councilor McCook.
I move to adopt the agenda as amended.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Oh, hang on a second. Please vote accordingly. Councilor Barnhart, can you state your vote on the amended agenda, please?
In favor.
Thank you. With that, motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Before we go on to our first agenda item, which is the budget proposed presentation from administration, I'll just say a couple few words. So first of all, Council, I want to thank you for coming this evening, and general public at home. Let you know that Councillor Barnhart is joining us by Zoom. She'll be attending the evening remotely. We'll be voting accordingly when the time comes to vote down the road in the budget process. Tonight's all about questions for administration, clarification, and answers on questions submitted already. There's no motions this evening. Motion will all be happening tomorrow. Just want to set the stage too, that as we know, our proposed budget increase is 3.66%. Approximately 1.4 of that is for the RCMP. The federal government finally finalized a outstanding 5-year contract agreement with the RCMP for wages, and that affects every municipality right across the country using the RCMP. And part of our proposed budget is 1.4% for the RCMP pay adjustment, and that is a set cost. So we appreciate the work they do for us to keep our communities safe. They've been on the contract for 5 years, no increases. That's tough to go through, and they persevered going through that and maintain doing the job for us in the communities. I want to thank the RCMP for their patience with the federal government, finding a contract negotiating in place, and it does affect our budget somewhat. So that leaves 2.26% that the City Council has control over with the budget for the 2022 fiscal year. So having said that, welcome to Budget 2022. Remember 4 years ago, when we did our first budget, some of us on council remember that. I went home with my wife, I spent $40 million today. I wasn't sure if I was scared or happy, actually. So that was quite the experience 4 years ago. So council, this is for 3 of you. This is your first experience doing a budget. It's going to be an interesting experience for you. I'm glad you're here to enjoy it with us. So with that, I will turn over to Mr. Dollar to begin the process of the budget explanation, please. Mr. Dollar, you have the floor in 1 moment here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Daniluk, and good evening to you and members of council. Even though you've just approved the agenda for this evening and subsequent budget meetings, I'll just spend a couple of minutes providing an overview of how at least administration kind of views the budget process over the next few days. So as council is well aware, the 2022 proposed budget was introduced to council at the November 9th meeting. The proposed budget reflected administration's best efforts to provide a balanced budget that supports current service levels, as well as an attempt to address the city's most urgent priorities. Administration's report and the 2022 proposed budget are still included in today's agenda package as item 4A for everyone's convenience. Following the introduction of the budget, though, on November 9th, council did have the opportunity to review those documents and submit questions to administration. Excuse me. I'm happy to say council was up to this task and provided administration with nearly 200 questions. Administration has now compiled, organized, and answered those questions to the best of our ability, and those responses are included in today's agenda packages, item 4.B. Today's agenda package was published on Friday, November 26, in an effort to allow council time for review of those responses. And so for today, our hope is to spend some time addressing any additional questions, points of clarification on main components of the capital, operating, and utility budgets. But before we get there, as part of agenda item 5, council will also have an opportunity to hear from the library on their proposed 2022 budget. Mr. Schwartz will then provide council with an overview of the organizational charts as they exist today. And then following all of this, council may wish to make amendments to the budget. As you know, budget amendments are made by motion, but in order to help facilitate this process and support council, we are asking to collect your proposed amendments. And I know some of those have been filtering in already, so thank you. But any other amendments can be provided through today's discussion and hopefully allow some time for the clerk to work with you on refining and organizing those amendments as well. Since we do have time scheduled on December 2nd and 3rd, council can debate and vote on those amendments on those dates, depending on how much time may be required. Once council has gone through that process and voted on the amendments, administration will need some time to modify the agenda and specifically the numbers in the budget in accordance and to reflect those approved amendments. Our intention would then be to bring the amended budget to council at the December 14th meeting for consideration at that time. On a final note, item 10 on the agenda addresses subsequent motions. This will be an opportunity to address any motions related to future reports on matters related to the budget. Administration wants to ensure that there is an opportunity to address any desired reports on matters related to the budget, but not essential for the approval of the budget on December 14th. A good example of this may be if council wanted more information or analysis on a particular program or service level, but having that information is not critical to passing the budget. The clerk will work with councillors who wish to make subsequent motions, and those will be addressed after all of the budget amendments are addressed and voted on. I hope that provides a general overview of how administration sees the next 3 meetings going, and certainly would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Dowler. At this point, does council have any questions on Mr. Dowler's comments to begin this evening? Any questions from council? Seeing none at this point, thank you, Mr. Dowler, for that presentation. And I want to thank administration, I know, and council as well. The questions you all submitted were quite lengthy and detailed, and administration turned those questions around in less than 5 business days. So it was a huge undertaking. We do appreciate the effort we put in to give those questions back. They were published publicly for residents to see across various topics that pertain to the budget. So thank you, administration and council, for doing that. It's a great help to understand how the budget process actually works. So Ms. Winter, we're going now into Mr. DeBlanco's presentation. Okay, so having said that, Mr. DeBlanco, you have the floor now, please, to discuss the proposed budget until approximately 6:20. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening to the mayor, council, and the rest of the public. I'm Curtis DeBlanco. I'm the director of finance for the city. Start off, I'll just welcome the new councilors to their first council budget meeting. As you all know, the proposed budget was presented to council 3 weeks ago, and since then, council has been given the opportunity to ask questions and receive responses. I'll now do a quick high-level summary of the budget. As you well know, the city's budget is divided into 3 distinct and separate budgets, one being the municipal operating budget, which is tax levy funded, the next being the utility operating budget, and finally the capital budget. The goals of the 2022 proposed budget are focused on stabilizing, maintaining, and sustaining service delivery, continuing transformational projects, and building a path for post-pandemic recovery. Note that between budget approval in December and when the tax rate bylaw is set in April, additional information will become available, specifically the education requisition amounts and the finalized assessment. This budget includes an increased tax revenue generated from physical assessment growth, which is new building or construction, of 2.7%. When speaking about the municipal operating budget, this proposed budget includes an increase to the tax levy of 3.66%. Just to start off with a point of clarification in terms of language, which will be used throughout the next few meetings, so that when specific terms are used, everyone is on the same page. When using the term tax levy, what we're actually referring to is the tax revenue requirement for the city, or the amount required to fund tax levy funded operations. When discussing a tax levy increase, we're discussing the revenue requirement, not the rate. So council has the ability to influence the tax levy through this budget process. Next, when we're discussing assessment, we're talking about the assessed value of property in the city. Depending on market factors, inflation, deflation, et cetera, the city's assessment can go up or down depending on the year. When discussing assessment growth, we're talking about new residential and non-residential construction in the city, adding to the overall assessment. The tax rate is calculated based on the previous 2 items, merely revenue divided by assessment, strictly algebra. To summarize, council has the ability to influence the tax levy through this budget process. The external market factors influences the assessment value within the city as well as growth. And then the rate is calculated based on the prior 2. So coming back to what we're here for, the budget and tax revenue requirement or tax levy, the proposed increase to the tax levy is the result of, or the net result of several factors. So I'll draw council's attention to page 7 of the budget document, which I believe is page 15 of the agenda package. So in the annual budget process, administration looks to maintain service levels with little to no increase to the tax levy. The 21 budget was passed with a 0% increase to the tax levy as a means to address the pressures ratepayers were faced with from the pandemic. The impact of this does create pressure on existing operations when dealing with growth and inflationary pressures, and administration has determined that in order to maintain services, there's an impact that equates to 0.7% of the current tax levy. As mentioned earlier, this budget has factored in an estimate of 2.7% for assessment growth or new constructions in the city. Administration has recommended specific growth-related initiatives, including addressing operating impacts of capital projects and positions required to address growth. The net impact of these items, both growth revenue and growth-related initiatives, is a negative number of approximately 1.2%. And as everything on page 7 or page 15 of the agenda package is stated in relation to the tax levy, a negative number would be good. The next category on this sheet is the net impacts of council decisions and other entities. Included in this category, as already alluded to by the mayor, is the estimated increase to the city's RCMP contract, stemming from recent collective bargaining that sees the average wage for an officer increase. It also includes $50,000 in funding for the arts to align with council policy. It includes the library's request for additional operating funds, whom council will hear from shortly. And finally, the cost to have the net deficit of ongoing Beaumont transit operations funded from ongoing revenue sources, such as the tax levy. Specifically on transit, at the outset of transit operations, approximately 4 or 5 years ago, the intent was to phase in transit operations onto the tax levy. The reserve draw has gotten, and a means to phase that in was through reserve draws. So the reserve draw has gotten smaller and smaller over this time with the goal to have transit fully funded from ongoing revenue sources by 2021. Last year, as part of the 2021 budget, council approved a draw from reserve for one additional year as a mechanism to reduce the tax increase to 0%. This proposed budget does not include a transfer for this. Rather, it reflects the ongoing operations of the transit service being fully funded from ongoing revenue sources, which are a combination of transit fares and taxes. The overall impact of this particular category is 2.55%. The next category are for service enhancements for fire, FCSS, and project management and execution of strategic city initiatives. The items in this category account for 1.6%. The net result of these factors is a proposed tax levy increase of 3.66%. Next, on the utility budget, which is page 79 of the budget document or page 87 of the agenda package. So for utility operations, the operations, repair, maintenance, and replacement of utility infrastructure are funded entirely from utility fees and not the tax levy. The city of Beaumont is responsible for the distribution of drinking water, management of storm and sanitary sewer systems, and collection of solid waste. These utility services are managed through the infrastructure department and include more than 80 kilometers of underground pipes, 2 pump stations, and reservoirs that provide safe and efficient water for potable water and fire protection purposes. City stormwater and wastewater systems also includes 80 kilometers of pipe and the weekly collection of residential municipal waste, recycling, and organics at more than 7,000 collection points throughout the city. The city factors in the proposed usage rates from water and wastewater commissions, the current solid waste contract, forecasted expenses for operations and maintenance of infrastructure, and reserve transfers for the repair and replacement of infrastructure in order to set these utility rates. As stated previously, the city's utility operations are fully funded from utility rates with no contribution from the tax levy. Lastly, on the capital budget, which is page 87 of the budget document or page 95 of the agenda package, the city's capital budget is divided into 3 categories, first being renewal, growth, and utility. You may recall from either Mr. Dowler or myself speaking at previous meetings about the need to maintain existing infrastructure being the foremost priority for any municipality. For this reason, the renewal programs listed are completely funded from municipal funding sources, their corresponding reserves. A quick point of clarification on these renewal programs for council is that the work involved with the program previously referred to as neighborhood renewal is still occurring through both the transportation renewal program and the parks, playground, playfield renewal program. So that program has always been in existence. It was just renamed over the last couple budget cycles. The next category, growth projects. In this section are 2 large projects relating to the Innovation Park and future school site, as well as programs to respond to the city's growth needs with regards to fleet and equipment, recreation facilities, and signage. And lastly, the programs listed under the utility headings are also renewal programs akin to those previously mentioned up top. The only difference is that these programs are funded from the utility reserve. And once again, the utility reserve is fully funded from utility rates, whereas the reserves for fleet, facilities, and transportation, et cetera, are funded from the tax levy. Within the capital section of the budget document are summaries for funding sources available to fund capital projects, and those include government transfers or grants, offsite levies and debt, and as well as reserves. It's important to note that the city's allocation for grants, specifically MSI, has been reduced substantially from prior years. As alluded to previously, this should have no impact on the city's ability to renew its existing assets, as those are funded through reserves. However, the city's ability to fund new and growth-related projects could be lessened. When considering the impact of utilizing growth funding for the current period, many factors need to be considered, including available funding balances available to fund these capital projects in future years, as well as the city's current debt and available debt limits. Future operating impacts of these capital projects must too be considered, as growth-related projects typically have ongoing costs, which may include debt servicing, that must be taken on within the municipal operating budget and typically require an increase to taxes. This concludes my summary of the proposed budget. This time I'll turn the floor back to council.
Thank you, Mr. DeBlanco. Appreciate that. I was going to ask council for any questions of Mr. DeBlanco, but we are looking at a hard stop at 6:20 to allow our library presenters to come and speak to council. So with that, council, I'll invite our presenters to come to the table, and please introduce yourself for the record, and please proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Is it on already? Oh, perfect. I
Yes.
can hear myself.
Just put a little closer so you can pick up the sound better. Thank you.
So hi, everybody. My name is Aruna Brennan, and I'm the library board chair.
And I'm Laura Winton, and I'm the director of the Beaumont Library.
So hello, Mayor Daniluk and council, and thank you for the opportunity to present the library's 2022 budget. Before we talk about the 2022 budget, we wanted to run through some background on library services in Alberta and also our work over the past year. You also received a copy of the library's 2020 annual report in your package for tonight for some additional background. So the Public Library Service Branch of the Government of Alberta and the Yellowhead Regional Library System provided us with some slides to help to share with new council members. So we thought, since we have a new council with some new faces, we give a brief overview of the Public Library Service. We're on slide number 2. That's works there. So we wanted to provide a brief overview of the Public Library Service in Alberta and the relationship between council, the city, and the library board. This relationship is pretty unique because while library service is a municipal responsibility in Alberta, the library board is actually a separate corporation with independence from the city and council. The board is appointed by council, and the municipality is the library's primary funder, but council does not direct library service, and it does not control the library's budget. Unlike other municipal services, library service isn't governed by the Municipal Government Act or the MGA. Libraries have a separate piece of legislation called the Libraries Act, and it works in parallel with the MGA, with neither overriding the other. So what is council's role in library services in Alberta? There are 6 things that council does for the library. The first is to establish a municipal library board. The decision to provide a library service in the community rests with council. If council chooses to offer that service, they pass an establishment bylaw that creates a municipal library board. Once that bylaw is established, the board becomes an independent corporation, and full management and control of library services and funds rests with the board. So the Beaumont has bylaw 946-19 that establishes the library board. I think it was in the 80s somewhere. Council also appoints, and if needed, dismisses library board members. Council has a responsibility to adequately fund the library board to provide services, but unlike other departments of the city, council does not approve the library's budget. The library must present a budget to council yearly, and that budget includes an estimate of the municipal funds or local appropriation required to run the library. Council can approve that funding request in full or in part, but it does not specify to the library board on how those funds would be used. Council also accepts or disallows the library's financial reviewer. So in Beaumont, the library board pays the city a fee to manage the library's funds on behalf of the board. And for expediency, we use the same financial reviewer and process the city uses. Council also accepts or disallows any library board bylaws. And finally, council can choose to join a regional library system. So past councils made the decision to become a member of the Yellowhead Regional Library System, which enables the library to take advantage of a huge number of regional library services to offer improved services at a significant cost savings. So then if we turn over to the library board is fully responsible for the management and control of the public library and its service. It sets strategic directions and goals for the library. It hires a director to run the operational side of the library, and it's established and funded by the municipality, but governs and operates independently. So hopefully this information is useful in providing a bit more context and background to the different roles for public libraries in Alberta. I'll now turn it over to Laura just to discuss some of the great work that's being done at the library.
Thanks, Aruna. So with some of that background in mind, what do libraries actually offer their communities, and what specifically does the Beaumont Library offer Beaumontonians? So the first thing I think that most people think of when they think about libraries is books. We think about buildings full of books, and we certainly have that. The library has books, but we also offer DVDs, audiobooks, and CDs, as well as access to electronic databases and e-books and e-audiobooks. We have a local collection of about 23,500 physical items available to borrow free of charge to all Beaumontonians. But we also provide access to a province-wide lending service through the Yellowhead Regional Library. And that allows us to bring material from almost any other library in Alberta to Beaumont. So ultimately, through the library, Beaumontonians have access to over 3 million physical items from over 180 libraries. In Beaumont, we've actually done significant work on our collections in 2021. We took the results of a diversity audit that we did in 2020, and we used it to set some selection guidelines to ensure we're representing and highlighting Indigenous, LGBTQIA2+, Black, disabled, and other marginalized authors and illustrators in our local collection. And we're also working with the Yellowhead Regional Library right now on a classification project that will allow libraries to do quick and easy diversity audits in their collections. So we can all be really more aware and more proactive about diversifying our collections. So I just wanted to talk a bit about that because we really are leading the way in Beaumont when it comes to diversity and representation in materials. Next slide, thanks. So another core library service is our programs. We're very proud to offer free programming to all Beaumontonians. This was a budget priority for us in 2021, and we've achieved it with the exception of our language learning programs that we continue to offer on a cost recovery basis. The Beaumont Library is really known in the library community for our high quality early literacy programs. Early literacy is fundamental and foundational to healthy development, and our programs focus not just on exposing children to those fundamentals when they're in our sessions, but really on helping parents build the knowledge and skills to incorporate those songs, those stories, those rhymes into their homes and their daily lives. So while these programs offer a really great time for all participants when they're there, they're about more than that. They're about helping parents and kids establish a foundation for success. We also offer programming for seniors, newcomers, teens and tweens, and homeschoolers. And we're really proud of a partnership we have with Métis Alive, a local Métis educational company. And we work with them to offer Métis story times, beading and moccasin making workshops. And we're really excited to look at expanding our Indigenous programming in 2022. So one of the exciting projects we had for 2021 was our BiblioBike. Council approved funding for us to purchase an electronic cargo bike that offered outreach programs in parks around Beaumont throughout the summer. We saw some great success with this initiative. Our BiblioBike programs and our presence at the market on Thursdays led to some new memberships we had the chance to program for and chat with people who weren't aware of library services. And ultimately, we ran 62 programs with the bike. We had 540 participants. And I think most impressively, we covered 181.8 kilometers on the bike. So we're very excited to refine this service based on the experiences we had in our first year in 2021 and to keep building our audience in 2022. Next slide. Thanks. So the library also offers Beaumontonians access to technology. We have 9 public computers available for use free of charge with or without a library card. We offer scanning, printing, faxing, and photocopy services, free access to Wi-Fi, and we're currently partnering with FCSS to loan Chromebooks and Wi-Fi hotspot hubs to community members who don't have access to those technologies. I think most importantly, though, we offer technology assistance. So as services are moving more and more online, the library's seen a real increase in community members needing help, and we really do it all. So whatever your technology need is, you come into the library and we'll help you with it, from assisting with online job applications to understanding how to use Zoom and set up an account, to scanning and sending legal documents, completing online exams. Library staff are here to help Beaumontonians with any and all technology questions and issues. So I think finally, the library is really, it offers access to free, safe, and welcoming space. And libraries are really one of the only places people can come and just be without needing to spend any money. In 2021, we worked really hard to make the space that we have do the most that it can for the community. As COVID restrictions eased, we've revitalized our children's area to make it feel as welcoming as possible. We added toys, manipulatives, and comfortable seating for parents and kids to cozy up. And the difference was really immediate and quite heartwarming. The very first day that we had the toys out, a mother came in with her kids and she said they'd been walking by the library and the little girl saw the trucks and the farm in the window and insisted they come in. And they left with a library card and a stack of books. So really wonderful stuff there. We also have 2 quiet study rooms. We have areas for quiet reading and reflection and space for friends to gather and study and chat. Next slide, thanks. So before we talk about the 2022 budget, I just wanted to provide a quick overview of the library's funding. These numbers are based on our 2021 budget. As mentioned, our primary funder is the City of Beaumont, and in 2021, the local appropriation was $890,800, and that was a 0% increase in 2021 from the previous year. We also receive grant funding from the Government of Alberta. We receive another grant from the Leduc County Library Board because we serve a portion of the Leduc County population. We receive some other grants, including a summer jobs grant from the federal government, and we do generate modest operating revenues through overdue fees, our book sale, and room rentals. And all that funding allows us to offer the long list of services that you see up there on the screen. Next slide, thanks. In 2021, we had 2 budget priorities, and we're proud to report that we accomplished both. As mentioned earlier, with the exception of our cost recovery language programs, all of our programming is now free. We also completed an organizational review that looked at staffing, organizational processes and procedures, policies, strategic plans, and offered recommendations to ensure we are offering efficient and optimized services. So I'll pass it back over to Aruna to talk about our 2022 budget priorities and go over the budget itself.
Perfect. So our 2022 budget was developed with these 3 priorities in mind. First, now that we have completed our organizational review, our priority is to implement the recommended organizational structure to ensure we are providing the best service to Beaumont. Second, we need to increase our collection size to get as close to the GOA essential standards as we can in our current space, and to get closer to meeting the community's demands for materials. Third, we need to increase the technology troubleshooting and digital literacy skills of our staff to meet the growing community demand for technology assistance. Our 2022 operating budget was developed with these priorities in mind. We knew that implementing our new organizational structure would lead to increases in personnel costs. Ultimately, our total budget for 2022 is projected at $1,076,600, a slight decrease from our 2021 budget. Our funding request to the city is $926,000, which is a 4% or a $34,800 increase over 2022 budget or 2022 funding. The funding increase is necessary to meet our 2022 goals. First, our organizational review identified that our organizational structure is not serving us. In order to pursue strategic priorities, we need to hire managers to plan, monitor, coordinate, and assess the work of our 3 departments. We also need to shift our FTE towards more permanent staff and reduce reliance on casual staff so that project work can be successfully managed. Ultimately, the restructuring will result in an overall increase of 0.3 FTE. Second, based on our GOA standards, our collection is undersized by about 19,000 items. Given space limitations, we will be unable to meet the GOA essential standards for collections in our current space. But as Laura mentioned, we conducted a shelving and space analysis in 2021. And we are happy to report that we are able to increase our collection size by 7,500 items. So this will bring our total collection approximately to 30,000 items. Doing this requires additional funding for our collections. Our plan is to reach our 30,000 item goal in the next 5 years and to increase by 5% or 1,200 items in 2022. Also identified in our organizational review was the need to develop a technology and digital literacy plan. Digital literacy and technology troubleshooting increasingly dominates our patron interactions and inquiries. The library previously designated a single staff member to assist with these inquiries, but that system just isn't working right now. Demand is too high and we cannot meet the need without increasing digital literacy and technology troubleshooting skills of our staff. In 2022, we are dedicating professional development funds to this task. Ultimately, we are confident our proposed budget will allow us to provide high quality library service. It will set us up for success in the coming years, particularly with a potential expansion in our future. And it will allow us to improve services in the areas of collection and technology. So once again, thank you, Council, for the opportunity to present on the library's work and provide you with more information on our 2022 budget request. As always, we appreciate the support Council provides, and we're excited to continue to offer Beaumontonians opportunities to explore, discover, and connect in 2022. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Brennan. Thank you, Ms. Winton, for your presentation. All nice to have you in front of council. Nice to see you again. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council for our presenters on their topic this evening? Councillor Tessier, you have the floor.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Just a clarifying question. On November 23rd, when you presented, I was understanding that 60,000 people came through the library and 20,000, and then this presentation says 11,000. Can you clarify?
Yeah, so what we presented on the 23rd was our statistics from 2015 to 2019. So we looked at pre-COVID traffic. What you're seeing today is our 2020 annual report. So that was last year, and it was a COVID year. So we saw a huge dip in our visits. We were actually closed for almost half the year in 2020. So visits went way down. So both numbers are accurate. It's just we were looking at 2019 on the 23rd, and today we're looking at 2020.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCall-Swain, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Always love hearing from you guys. I think the library is a strong passion of mine. It does such great things for our community. So thank you for all the time and effort you put into it. Just a quick comment on the library space and the kids. My little guy was in there causing havoc on Monday, and it was a lot of fun for him, maybe not for me, but it was great. So just those little things mean a lot. That little stage was always a lot of fun for them to get up and perform, but now with those little things in there. So I just wanted to recognize that those little things make a big difference, and the story about the kid walking past the window doesn't surprise me. So great job on that. I wonder if you could just speak a little bit more about the provincial standards around the impact on staffing, and recognizing the huge amount of efficiencies that you've been able to achieve with that restructuring. I'll be honest, I don't know how you were able to do that with the small increase that you're requesting from us. But let me put it this way: I was surprised that there wasn't an ask in here for more staffing, given where we're at. So I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about that, talk about the standards, and then your thought process around, because clearly we're behind it. So do we have enough this year? We're just trying to, so just maybe just a little bit more around the staffing impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to take this? Sure. Yeah, so we do hit the FTE that we need for essential standards for staffing based on GOA. Almost. Technically, the GOA asks us to have one additional MLIS. When we did our organizational review, we had an external consultant come in. So she was looking at where we're currently at, where we want to go, and how best to grow. So the obvious answer, I think, is, well, you just hire one more MLIS, you call them an assistant director, you're good to go. But we wanted to be really a lot more thoughtful about it. So we looked at the talent that we currently have in-house. We looked at the different departments that we have de facto. And what we actually decided made the most sense was to use our current inside talent, promote some of those roles into manager positions so that they're overseeing their own departments, and then do a little bit of restructuring around how we staff the desk so that we can not bring you quite as huge an increase as one might expect with a major organizational review, but still achieve those efficiencies. So we will still be looking to grow in the future. So because we know we wanted to be budget conscious, some of the positions we haven't gone with full-time for those management positions yet, and we'll be looking to increase those over the next few years. But for now, we feel confident that this is the start we need to make.
Okay, that's very, very helpful. Thank you for that. And again, great work going through that. You're right. Whenever there's an organizational review, I get nervous, but to see that come back, great work. Now, the other thing that's in the budget here, and while we have you in front of us, and someone jump and yell at me if I can't ask questions around the library expansion, the capital piece. No one seems to be looking at me, so that's they're not listening, or I'm okay. So we'll just carry on. So as you know, in here we've got $210,000. We kind of talked a little bit about that. Now that's currently below the line. The technical term unfunded. in this piece. Now, clearly, you guys think strongly enough that you try to put it in here, and you know, the question that I have, and we talked a little bit about it on Tuesday, is just the impact of the broader arts piece that is looking at, and how does that play with the library expansion? And you know, we haven't heard from that committee coming directly to us. So I guess my direct question would be, if the 210,000, and I recognize it's looking to get construction docs, and then ultimately looking for the larger capital expense in 2023. If we didn't approve that and it stayed unfunded, does that push everything a year, or is it possible to get those construction docs in 2023 if that was the process, in order to then look at the larger library expansion? I'm just curious, does not funding it this year push the whole thing a year, or can we kind of parlay those together in 2023 if that's where it came to?
So council can certainly make that decision to parcel them. We don't want to lose momentum on this project. And given that we're finishing up design, it makes sense to roll into construction documents now and try to move that forward so that we don't have to make adjustments to the design given the lapse in time. I would say that the Performing Arts Center and the library project are really two distinct projects. We are certainly talking back and forth, but they are two separate things at this point, and that's how we're moving forward. Can council fund construction documents and construction all in one go in 2023? You could certainly make that decision. We'd have to allot time for construction documents, so actually finishing that construction would be pushed back.
Yeah. Okay. And you know, recognize your comment around that they're two separate things. I haven't heard enough from that committee for me to be able to determine that that's the vision there. You know, I think we talked about last time the multiple groups that are going to be competing for capital dollars, and if we can find efficiencies. So just, you know, as we go through and ultimately get into a discussion when we debate this, and whether it's above or below the line, that's just a concern for me, is this too soon without hearing from us? So I just wanted to be clear on that up front, but great job presenting the budget. You know, a very, very small increase here given what you guys have done. So great job. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. I have a question, but I'll go to Councillor Barnhart first. She's on Zoom this evening. Councillor Barnhart, you have a question, I believe?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Aruna and Laura. Great presentation. Really do appreciate. I can't see your faces. I can see the back of your heads, but I do hear everything you're saying. Hi, thanks very much. I just have one question, and this has come up pretty much every year that I've been on council. I thought I want to keep to tradition and ask it again. And it's regarding the $30,000 in the transfer from surplus. And I see this year that it is now showing as an additional $30,000. It's not been lost to the budget. I see it's been added into the transfer from the city of Beaumont. I guess my question to you is that something that the board feels is the right step to take at this point? I know on previous library boards, the use of those surplus dollars was always questionable as to when the board could use it or not. Does this give you the flexibility you need, or are there any concerns with that transfer of the surplus?
So the library has been working closely with administration on how best to manage that. So what we had been doing previously is really that 30,000 is our operating reserve funds. And rather than have it in a separate account that's controlled by the library board, what we've done is just roll it forward into our operating budget every year. We don't think that that's actually the best way to do things. We and in speaking with administration all agree that the best thing to do is actually set that up as a separate reserve account that the board has free access to. So that is the plan for how we're going to proceed in 2022, and we'll be working out the details with administration.
Okay, so that maybe my question then is to the administration, if I could, Mayor, just to clarify that the way we see it in the budget right now, can that still be done that way by putting it into the reserve after the budget is approved?
Mr. Blanco.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart. So I'll just clarify a little bit on previous practice. So that transfer from surplus, and Ms. Winton explained it well, but it was set aside so that the library board would have access to some contingency funds without their need to come to city council to request approval for it. Just as Ms. Winton explained, working directly with the library board and setting up those funds as a reserve for the library, then they would have access to them at any times without having to still come back to city council for approval to spend them. And that way we don't need to set it up as a transfer from surplus. There's no contingency then in this budget.
So it sounds like you're in agreement with the board that they will have $30,000. Is that the amount that they will have in the reserve?
So the amount that would be in the reserve would be the amount of previous library operating surpluses. There's currently and it shows in this document as a library building reserve. And what that library building reserve is, the balance is composed of both the city's contribution to the building reserve for the city's building, as well as the library's operating surpluses. So what will happen as part of the year-end process this year is administration will likely recommend that those two balances be split into separate amounts, one being a library controlled reserve with their operating surplus, and then the other amount be transferred to the city's building reserve. So that way that reserve would then be controlled by the library board rather than needing to come to city council to access it, as those are library operating surplus funds. And one of the our members from legislative services as well as the library may clarify, but this for better aligns with the Libraries Act.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that you're working together on that to make it work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I have one quick question, if you don't mind, please. I noticed in your presentation, the budget part, you had programming going down by 17% in 2022. You can expand on what that actually means in terms of what is being cut or what is being reduced. How's that being arrived at, please?
Yeah, so I really base that on actuals for the last couple years. So looking at 2021 and 2020, we know that 2022 we're not likely to be in a full non-COVID year. So knowing that we needed to find some savings, we looked at those actuals and we tried to find places where, you know, we're not spending what we used to because we're not doing everything in person. So I would expect that those programming amounts are going to increase in future years when we're back to our full programming slate. But for next year, this is what we think we need.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any further questions from council for our presenters from our library? Seeing none, again, thank you for coming this evening. I do appreciate your time and the presentation and how vibrant the library is. It's very exciting to see that. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Council.
you.
Thank you. Ms. Winter, we did not have a chance to ask council question, Mr. DeBlanco, before we go on to say or short. So would you concur that we should have council now ask questions of Mr. Blanco's previous comments before the library board began the presentation? What are your thoughts on the agenda process? Oh, sorry. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor. I would suggest that Mr. DeBlanco comes back to answer any of the questions that council may have with his previous presentation before CEO Schwartz proceeds.
That's what I was expecting. Thank you. So going back to our agenda process, Mr. Blanco made his comments. Are there any questions from council based on Mr. DeBlanco's comments, please? Councilor McCook, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Daniluk. Quick question. The neighborhood renewal, you said it's still occurring. It's just named under a different category. Can you just clarify which the category is again?
Yes. Through the mayor to Councillor McCook, it would be both the transportation renewal and then portions of the parks, playgrounds, and playfields renewal program.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? See none going forward. Thank you very much. We'll now proceed with CEO Schwartz. Has some comments to make around the organizational chart. Mr. Schwartz, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, and echo Mr. Dowler's comments. Welcome to your first budget cycle of this term. You've been in office for 44 days and you have 1,419 left to go. So I think it's time that we did something. So I appreciate your time. I've sent copies of the org charts, and what I was planning on doing is giving a very brief overview and then turning it over to the DCAOs who will explain their internal and external services. And then with the directors, we've asked them if they could give a quick overview of each of the boxes. This is not a one and done. If there's more information that you'd like, feel free to send me some emails or reach out to me.
So just some context setting, as an organization, and administrations are different than corporations, although we like to operate like them. However, we don't have any money. And that's something that's very misunderstood sometimes. We believe that as an organization and together with council, that we're the keepers of the taxpayers' dollars. But it's not our investment, it's the taxpayers' dollars. And we take that very seriously, whether it be municipal taxes, provincial taxes, or federal taxes. All that money, grants or otherwise, are taxes. So we take that seriously, as I said, and it makes it, municipalities need to operate a little differently, and thus the transparency and so on. We recognize that the workplace is changing, the workers' needs, the residents or the customers' needs, they change rapidly. So this organization bobs and weaves like the best of them. We've done a lot of changes in the last 4 or 5 years, and we will continue to do that. We're building a culture and a structure that allows us to deliver municipal services unlike any other municipality, and we're striving towards that. We try and build that culture where our learning is intentional. That's the only way I believe, and we believe, that we can survive in today's rapid cycles. I shared with council before, and I'll share it once more just for the public's entity, and then we'll look at the slides here. Is we have set 4 priorities for administration to focus on as an organization for 2022, and one of them is culture. Culture feeds all of the rest, and without that workplace culture to deal with the changes and the climate that's out there, you don't stand a chance. Number 2 is customer service. Our organization is always about service delivery, and it can always improve. Number 3 is digital transformation. We want to digitize as much of our work as possible. Therefore, there are a whole bunch of other ways that work can be performed and that service can be delivered. And the 4th one is environmental and social impacts. So how much we work on each one of those, depending on the priorities that come out of council, will depend on our capability, or sorry, our capacity, but those are the 4 things that we want to focus on. So if you could put up the first slide for me when you're ready, Ms. Winter. We have flattened our organization, and we have created 2 wings, an internal and external services. We have what's known as the Office of the CAO, where myself and the 2 DCAOs sit. We share an admin assistant, an executive assistant between the external and the CAO, and the executive assistant for the DCEO also provides administrative support to finance and to the organization in general. So our intention is to remain lean. I want to talk about, and we're going to get into the directors in a second, we operate the organization. We have 11 directors on what we call our senior leadership team. These 11 directors with the CAO's office is the body that's making the decisions on the direction of the organization, on that service delivery, on that culture, on where we're going. They have an active role. That's where the bulk of decisions are made. And every consultant in the world will tell you that 14 people in a room cannot make an effective decision. This group has worked extremely hard over the last 16 months to prove that wrong, and we are. So with that, if we can go to the next slide, I am going to turn it over to Ms. O'Neill, to Mr. Dallard. When I was putting the presentation together very quickly this afternoon, I realized that I didn't put all the externals under the external and all the internals on it. So there might be some back and forth. That's my bad. Mr. Dallard.
Thank you very much. So as Mike mentioned, there's these 2 wings to the organization, and internal versus, bad choice of words, internal and external, together collaborating to provide services to the community. The internal services are probably what you would expect from an internal services description in an organizational chart. So looking at the top left of the chart, we have a people services department, usually or otherwise known as human resources, looking after those typical HR types of things around payroll, as well as hiring, and policies related to HR, benefits, all that kind of fun stuff. Sorry. Thanks. So typical HR functions reside there. We have a director of communications on the right-hand side. Mr. Berezowski is somebody council, I'm sure, is familiar with at this point in time, providing primarily at this point in time external services or external communications support to areas of the organization, information briefings, social media, all that fun stuff as it relates to communications. Below communications, we have a director of corporate analytics and technology, otherwise known as just IT services. But the corporate analytics part is something that we've added into the mix here. And for us as an organization, we talk a lot about being, operating like no other municipality. And a lot of that is hopefully going to be driven out of this corporate analytics area, where part of the mandate is to look at processes and how we can improve processes. In some cases from a technology perspective, but not necessarily. It's really about getting into the efficiency of the organization and making improvements in those areas. Below that, we have a director of legal and legislative services who you've become very familiar with over the first few weeks here at the city. A new department, and I should mention also the director of corporate analytics and technology is a new director role for the organization, as is the director of legal and legislative services. And this is an area where we felt we needed to enhance some of the services and support to council, as well as to the organization. And we've talked previously about some simple things in terms of efficiencies around consolidating legal services as it relates to the organization. And certainly a big part of the work there in this department relates to council relations and support to council, be it in these council meetings or through regional initiatives and those intergovernmental relations with other orders of government as well, so provincial and federally as well. Finally, in the internal services, we have a finance department led by Mr. DeBlanco here this evening. Again, very typical finance functions that you would expect to see. Accounts receivable, payable. We are trying to, I guess, move the department into some value-added areas. So more analytics, less about the day-to-day kind of operational pieces around AP, AR, and those are important, but hopefully bringing in more efficiencies through automation in those areas to free up some of those resources so that we can allocate them into other areas. And you'll see that as we move further through the budget in terms of some of the benefits of doing that. So at a high level, that's the internal services wing of the organization.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Everything that external services does cannot be done without the collaboration from internal services. I'm so honored to be the DCAO for this position that leads the external services and to have a team that's incredible. And I'll let them speak to each one of their departments, but really from parks and roads to childcare to attracting investment, recreation, enforcement, water, cemeteries, transit, the list of services that we provide goes on and on. Safety codes, arts, you name it. So people that live, work, visit Beaumont are impacted by these external services. And as a branch or wing, we are striving to build a community with spirit, So I'll turn it over to the directors.
Thank you. So yeah, on the screen, as Mr. Dowler alluded to, is the finance department. Responsible for accounting, financial reporting, assessment and taxation, revenue services, procurement, budget and financial planning, and financial analysis. So up on the screen, we'll start from right to left. So we have a supervisor for accounting services and 3 accounting services clerks. 2 of those are responsible for accounts receivable, utility and taxation mostly, as well as general receivables, and a payables clerk as well. There's also a procurement clerk, and on the left side of the screen, we have a municipal finance intern and a financial analyst. And those 2 positions are part of what Mr. Dowler was alluding to in terms of building out the department's ability to provide forward-looking financial analysis rather than just the day-to-day transactional things. So the right side of the screen, that part of the staff is focused on the transactional day-to-day operations, where the left side of the screen, as well as the director role, is more focused on the budgeting, financial planning, and analysis aspects.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to one of our newest departments, which is Legal and Legislative Services. As Mr. Dowler mentioned, we are a part of the internal services. We cover a fairly wide range of roles and functions, some of which Council will be very familiar with. So our areas oversee things like election, census, orientation, council meetings, committee of the wholes, agenda management, production, boards, committees, tribunals. We also have responsibility for records management and the freedom of information and protection of privacy requests. We manage those. Something that is new, it existed in the organization previously, but has now been consolidated under the manager of legal and intergovernmental relations, is the coordination and support to our intermunicipal relationships, as well as the management of legal services. So since we are a very new department, right now we're sort of getting the lay of the land, taking stock of what needs to be coordinated, what process improvements we can bring to the organization, how we can better leverage our internal resources to get more return for our investment. Another area that falls under our department is reception. And this is probably often overlooked when we talk about legal and legislative services, because it's not necessarily a traditional component of a legal and legislative services area. However, that receptionist area is also a really important point of contact for the public. And even though we are internal facing, because of our support to council and our interactions with the public, we do have a lot of public facing components. So that's a fairly high level overview. You can see on the chart, we have 2 managers and then several frontline staff reporting up to one of our managers.
Thank you. Mr. Dowler, your mic's on.
Yeah, thank you. Our Director of People Services, Donna Montney, is unavailable this evening, so I'm going to try my best at providing a little bit more detail on this one without butchering it too much. And fortunately, Donna's provided me some notes, so I'll stick to the notes as best as I can. So People Services, as I mentioned previously, is typically those HR functions you would expect, which includes recruitment and onboarding, training and development. Health and safety is a big key part of it. Rewards and compensation as an organization. So again, the payroll aspect, employee relations. The other big aspect that, as Mike mentioned earlier, that we're focused on this year is culture and well-being. And then the diversity, equity, and inclusion component as well is certainly an area of growth for us as we move forward here as an organization. You'll see on the org chart in front of us this evening, there is a manager of health and safety as a term position with a couple of business partners related to health and safety underneath that. On the other side of the org chart, we have a manager of HR services. And these individuals carry a heavy load with all of those activities that I mentioned in terms of recruiting, training and development, rewards, compensation, employee relations, culture and well-being. specifically. So there's a few people there that try and carry the load when it comes to those services themselves.
Your mic's on, Jay.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jay Melvin, Director of Protective Services. My branch looks after municipal enforcement with our community bylaw, community peace officers and bylaw officers program. Within there is also a term position for a weed inspector in the summertime. School resource officer, also a community peace officer, works with school and school divisions. Our fire division, deputy fire chief, fire training officer, looks after the training for the membership, along with our member that looks after our fire inspection program and prevention program, education within the city, and obviously our volunteer firefighters. Within that also is our primary more of an admin function within our RCMP. I work with our RCMP detachment commander and also the admin staff down there that are city employees. So I'm the conduit for communication with them. And I also have an administrative assistant who supports protective services as a whole. Okay.
Jay, welcome to Beaumont. This is week 2 now, I believe.
I'm on day 8,
Day 8.
Mr. Mayor, so
Well,
things are going
we're
well.
on day 44, so welcome
Okay.
to the newbie
Beauty.
club.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're good. You're on.
Am I good? Okay.
Yes, you're on. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Aaron Lewicki. I met most of you a few weeks ago. So I'm the Director of Infrastructure. So the structure, we have a Manager of Infrastructure, which we have team leads for roads and drainage. They do all our roads, operations and drainage work, which includes, culverts, ditches, roadways, that sort of thing. So we have a team lead for water and wastewater. So that's our water distribution system. They do all the testing and maintenance on the water system. And so we have two operators and then summer staff for that. And then the wastewater, sorry, these masks make it's hard to talk. Actually, I'm just going to do this. So I'm sitting by myself. So the wastewater is also done by the same team with 2 FTEs and the summer term students. And then we have our parks team, and we have, they do all of the parks operations work, which includes trail maintenance, grass cutting, maintaining parks, garbages, things like that. And we have 4 operators and 1 laborer there with summer terms to make up the additional volumes that we have in the summer. And then, of course, we also have a fleet coordinator because we have, as you've seen in the budget, we have some fleet equipment that needs to be maintained and managed accordingly. So that's kind of that piece of the structure. Then we have our manager of operations, which includes our team lead for facility operations. So we maintain all of our city facilities through that team. Which includes a technician and a coordinator, which work with different contractors to complete different lines of work at these facilities. We also have an operations resource inspector, an operations relation coordinator, contract administrator, and an inventory clerk. This team works with the rest of the department to facilitate operations across the department. Recently, the engineering team has been brought into the infrastructure group. This is a recent change to the org chart. We have a project manager on that team, as well as 2 engineering technologists, which do land development work and work on, some of our developments like Le Rev, for instance, or ELAN, those types of projects. And we also have a lot grading technician in the summer to oversee some of that work. Now, there is an omission to this current figure, which doesn't show an environmental lead. So we do have an environmental lead as part of the engineering team. And I also wanted to indicate that this structure is under review and we're looking at optimizing some different aspects of this, as well as clarifying the project management team that we have. I know that's been discussed in some of the questions that were raised in the budget questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, just a shade louder wouldn't hurt. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jennifer Bosa-Hudak, and I'm the director of the newly formed department called Corporate Analytics and Technology, as shown in front of you on this organizational chart. It was formed in 2021, as we have been given an opportunity in 2022 to present in much more detailed content related to our individual departments, service areas, and programs to council. I'll keep this brief. Our team is comprised of highly specialized and talented individuals in the fields of business process improvements, spatial data analytics, systems programming, enterprise system management, and of course, our information technology areas. With the formation of our department and upskilling of some team members through natural attrition, we have been very busy this last quarter developing work plans to address the backlog of end-to-end connectivity and challenges we have been faced with in our digital infrastructure. I will leave all those specific details to our future presentations in 2022, and do look forward to introducing the artifacts our department will be producing to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our daily operations throughout the city. As you can see with that org chart, I basically have one manager and a team reporting up to that manager and a stream on the continuous improvement side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hudak.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Kendra Raymond. I'm the Director of Planning and Development with the City of Beaumont. The Planning and Development Department is responsible for orderly and sustainable growth that reflects the vision of the city that is set through Council. So we develop statutory and non-statutory plans, bylaws, and policies, such as master plans, that sort of thing. Process development applications, such as development, building permits, area structure plans, and we ensure that buildings are constructed to Alberta Safety Code standards through our Safety Codes permit group. What you'll see on the screen is that we essentially are divided into two different divisions. We have the current planning side and we have the long range planning side, the two managers representing for both. So underneath the manager of planning and development, which is really our manager of current planning, that is where our development team and our safety codes teams live with those groups. So that is everything. We're responsible for houses, land use bylaw, enforcement, once again, safety codes, building permits, and the like. And then we have a regional planning stream with our lonely senior planner sitting out there in the middle. That senior planner is somebody that does do a lot of our regional planning, and we are working on revamping how that works with intergovernmental relations coming on board through legal and legislative services. But we still will be having a large role to play in our regional relationships with our municipal neighbors and as subject matter experts through board initiatives. So you will continue to see us at those different tables and whatnot as we work through those of the intermunicipal planning framework, our relationships with Leduc County and the City of Edmonton. We will continue to play a large part. Then you'll see the manager of long range planning. That is where the statutory and policy planning happens. So when we're talking about new neighborhoods, area structure plans, our municipal development plan, really the vision for how Beaumont gets to 45,000 people over the next 20 plus years, that is the area that is responsible for doing those initiatives. And as Mr. Lewicki mentioned, you do see an environmental lead here. Up until recently, environmental services was a function under long range planning as part of environmental planning. And that function has moved over to join the manager of engineering over in the infrastructure department. So that is our small but nimble team.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Paul Suter. I'm the Director of Recreation. Went through a name change this year. I was formerly known as the Director of Community Services, but that was not really accurate as to what my role was. So the title was changed to Director of Recreation. And I'm proud to be a strategic head and oversee services in that area for the team that likes to deal with fun. And on the screen there, you'll see I've got two managers. The Manager of Recreation is responsible for delivery of program and services, such as aquatics, guest services at the front end of our three buildings, team lead in sport and fitness, as well as the community center staff, child mind and the BSRC, those types of things. On the other side, you'll see the Manager of Rec Facilities, which is basically overseeing the staff required to provide support in the operations of the three buildings. And the three buildings are, of course, the BSRC, the Can-Nickel Regional Rec Center, as well as the community center. And the third pillar that I'm calling it is a new position this year, a team lead arts and events. And that is, improving and building our capacity to support the arts and culture in Beaumont. And that new position oversees events, as well as is just getting the toes wet, supporting our CVO arts and culture groups. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kim Williston, and I am the Director of the Community and Social Development Department. So this department was recently changed names. We were really under the FCSS umbrella, the Family and Community Support Services umbrella, but that didn't accurately reflect the programs and services that we provide within the community. So hence the new name. So in my department, we have three main service areas. We have the youth center, the Chantal Barubi Community Youth Center. We have a supervisor, and we have casual workers, as well as one youth programmer and one youth outreach worker. Their services are to provide youth in the community with a safe space and the supports that they need and life skills so that they can be productive members of our community. The next service area is childcare services. And under childcare services, we have the early learning childcare center, and we have the school age site, which is the before and after school care. In that service area, we have a variety of staff, from program coordinators to program assistants, who look after approximately 138 children. And then in the FCSS service area, we have three community development coordinators. They're all social workers, and each social worker has a portfolio. One is responsible for providing services for children and families. One is providing services for youth, and the other is providing services for seniors and the general community. So that pretty much rounds out the Community and Social Development Department.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council. So the Economic Development Department, we really support the business retention and expansion of our current businesses and work with them on how to best promote what they do and also the community. We also take the lead when it comes to investment attraction to the city. So that could work from everything from strategic partnerships to much larger, longer term investment inquiries. As well, we work with local, regional, and broader developers and realtors that are active or just exploring the opportunity of doing business in Beaumont. Our goal really is to focus on the client relations, is to build and maintain the relations that we have and to foster and welcome new relations as an organization. Within our department, we have the analyst or the coordinator position. They are key on all of the business licensing. So they're the key point of contact and the initial point of contact for businesses coming to Beaumont and or renewing. Also, they handle all of our day-to-day inquiries around business in Beaumont, or even a lot of times general inquiries about Beaumont. Also sponsorship and advertising. So all of the advertising you see in our facilities is coordinated through that role. The day-to-day operations of our co-work site, and as we ramp up, the programming and activities around that. And then just the support for the department. The analyst role is really key when it comes to making sure that the data we gather and we analyze it about the city. Often we're getting data requests from projects, from realtors, from regional groups. That analyst role is key on making sure that data is readily available and responding to data inquiries. They also are very much involved in some of our key initiatives, being able to pull information from different departments, do research as required to be able to move forward on some of these smaller, all the way up to larger initiatives. They also help with the management and oversight of our customer relationship management system, which is developing and building that skill set up. And finally, they really support the execution of some of our strategic partnerships. So once they are in place, just making sure that they're helping foster and grow those partnerships. The manager role is really the forward-looking strategic individual that works with our developers and our realtors to make sure that as new projects come to Beaumont, they know how to enter the city, how they can understand maybe if it's lay of the land, rules, regulations. They are very much that interface between our internal organization and the developers and the active realtors in the area. They also all of the contract management and a lot of the land transactions that we do as a city all go to the manager role, which is very key to make sure they understand both the business side and how it interfaces with our administration. The naming rights of our facilities and some of our major sponsorship and advertising agreements are also overseen by the manager. And then the RFIs. So we quite often get requests for information for new businesses, offices, developments coming through our regional partners like Edmonton Global. The manager oversees the responses and helps pull together the packages that we do reply with. But it's only because of the relationships that exist that some of that information is readily available. And then at the director level, it's really about the larger investment attraction activities, some of the business retention stuff at the local and regional level. So if it's the Edmonton Global relationships, some of the economic development relationships across the region. And then it's really building out those strategic alliances. So it could be from some of our partners like Health Cities, for example, where and how can we broaden the benefit to the residents and what does that look like? And it constantly exploring ways that we can diversify our revenue stream and think differently as a city to attract investment, which makes us unique. So the positioning, the branding, the marketing of how we are of Beaumont outside of the region really is our department's role and the directors, making sure that we keep a pulse on what's happening.
Thank you, Rob.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and to the members of the public who are watching tonight. I'm Mike Berezowski, the Director of Communications. We have some key functions of the department. We provide information to residents about the city's programs, services, and policies. We promote the city to key audiences and are responsible for managing Beaumont's brand. We provide strategic advice and planning about the issues that affect the city's direction and reputation. And recently, we've also taken on the responsibility for public engagement, the oversight and coordination of public engagement activities by the city of Beaumont. We do this with a staff of 4. The strategists all have very similar responsibilities. The senior strategists have some additional ones, but each strategist is responsible for the planning, coordinating, and execution of communications and marketing needs for departments. Each strategist is assigned to a number of departments within the organization. The strategist also has some AV responsibilities, editing of video and audio, for example. And the 2 senior strategic positions have additional responsibilities for media and issues management strategy and for social and digital media strategy as well.
Thanks, Mike. CEO Schwartz.
Yeah, thank you. Just for a couple of closing remarks, and I want to thank the directors. We literally sprung this on them. It was a lot for council to take in on a short period of time. As I mentioned, it's not a one and done. The short period of time was not by design, but represents a pivot that we made as soon as today. We are organizing facility tours for council, so you get a chance to actually see what some of the descriptions you just got, and then directors will be there to answer any more questions. As well, as we have mentioned, we will be doing department updates, likely 2 of them at each committee of the whole, as soon as we move into the new year and we can get this set up. So that's going to give you even more information. As infrastructure talked about the changes, and we will amend these charts and get them updated ones to you. It does include a project management office. That's something that Aaron has brought to the organization, and we're going to go that route. As you can tell, and there is no organization anywhere that is so diverse as a municipality. I'm not talking about our municipality, I'm talking about all of them. The types of service and the amount of service is so broad. It's very difficult to find experts in every area. We have been able to attract and retain the best of the best. And I say that over and over again, and I bug my regional colleagues about that on a regular basis. And as you can see, I'm not kidding. Our attrition in this organization is virtually non-existent, and that's just a credit to everybody who's here to serve this community. Pound per pound, if you compared us to another organization per capita, we are understaffed and we are moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. We always describe it as flying down on a bullet train and throwing track down in front of us. And that's what we've been doing for a number of years. The main objective that council had directed us in the last term, and likely is going to roll over into this term, is the diversification of the tax base. So any recommendations that you see are in an effort to achieve that, to diversify, to get some non-residential tax base, which will, in the long run, help our residents. We look at specific tax increases right now are on the backs of the residents to the tune of 93%. So as an organization, supporting council, supporting this community, we've got some great things ahead of us, and looking forward to it. And with that, we can answer any questions, but like I say, it's not a one and done. So thank you. And thanks to the directors and the DCOs.
Thanks, CEO Schwartz. That was very, very informative. I know it's something we knew we were doing now, and it does illustrate the breadth and the depth of our organization. When you see all the different lines of communication in terms of reporting and so on, everything that we do, it's amazing how much we do in this municipality. So with that, I'll open up to questions from council of CEO Schwartz and the presentation we just went through a few moments ago. Are there any questions? We will after questions, yeah. No. Councilman Newkirk, you have the floor.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Daniluk, to administration. I don't know if now is the right time to answer this or not, but I see Ms. Williston is still here. I'm just trying to weave together something that will come up later in the budget that's funded and unfunded with the org chart. Should I ask the question now that Ms. Williston is here, or should I save it for probably the better time later in the conversation?
CEO Schwartz.
Yeah, I'm gonna rely a bit on Ledge and on the mayor. If we could keep the questions for clarification at this point in time, which is the purpose of this session. So I'm gonna ask you to use your judgment. What do you think it is? Is it clarification, or is it starting to build a debate?
No debate. It is purely clarification, and it's just around the titles of the roles. So we're proposing a new position that would be Supervisor, Family and Community Support Services. And then an unfunded position is the Cultural Inclusion Coordinator that would report to the FCSS and Social Development Supervisor. I don't see an FCSS and Social Development Supervisor currently on the org chart. So I'm just wondering how that would all work together. Yeah. And if I need to repeat that, Kim, just let me know.
Who wants to speak on that, Ms. Bujaya, or? Oh, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Ms. Wilson, you hear the question?
Yes, your mayor and your worship through to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk. The reason that that is not on the org chart is that you are getting the org chart that currently exists. With the position, the new position that we are putting forward, the Cultural Inclusion Coordinator, that position would actually fall under the Social Development branch. The reason being is because that would be slightly out of scope for FCSS. And so in broadening the scope of the Community and Social Development Department, that position would fit under the Social Development or service area if the position was approved by council. But as of today, that does not currently exist.
Okay, just to clarify?
Yep, please.
Yeah, so so the cultural inclusion coordinator is currently unfunded. And the person that they would report to right now, does that position currently exist, or is that also an unfunded position?
That is in the council budget as a funded position. That would be the supervisor of FCSS and social development.
Okay, you answered my question. Thank you. So one is so basically, yeah, they go together. It clicked in my head. It's just wording in the way it's presented. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCobb-Swain, you have the floor, followed by Councillor Tessier.
Yeah, thank you. Two quick clarifying questions. Maybe first one around maybe Ms. Bougere and Ms. Raymond, just around the support. I'm a little confused around traditionally long-range planning helped with a lot of the external relations, and you talked a bit about that in your role, your overview, Kendra. You know, we obviously have multiple boards out there, but then we've come in and brought in that new management position for that also is kind of focusing on that. So I'm just curious how as a department, and maybe it's just a work in progress, but how you're thinking about assigning staff as we go into these regional areas. And maybe I'll use transit as the example, where you've got, it sounds like that there's a long range planner that's going to be part of that transit piece. But you know, clearly there is a lot of intermunicipal government aspects to that. So I'm just curious, and clearly you're going to be working together on this, but just if you've got some more thoughts on how those, you know, how that one kind of function is reconciled within those two departments.
Ms. Bougere.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Councillor Munkoff-Swain. Thanks for the question. So we are in the process of sorting that out, but in terms of just a quick overview, and I'm sure Kendra can add to this, the idea is that legal and legislative services will take on the coordination of all the intermunicipal support relationships. We won't necessarily provide all the subject matter expertise because we can't. We are going to rely on members of administration from infrastructure planning, depending on the regional entity in question. So for example, some of the wastewater commissions or water commissions would be supported by the environmental expertise in infrastructure. Whereas some of the things that are very planning focused, the subject matter expertise would still come from the planning area. However, we are looking to expand how we support those intermunicipal relationships. So expanding what we do with the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, now Alberta Municipalities, how we leverage our relationship with FCM, for example, how we coordinate that, how we provide updates to council. So it's a bigger piece of work than just the subject matter expertise, but I don't want to give any misrepresentations. We are not providing subject matter expertise on the full suite of topics because simply we don't have that expertise in our department.
Thank you. Ms. Raymond.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So to build on what Sandy was saying, because I'm going to butcher her last name at this point with my mask on, Bougere. I hardly ever say her last name, so I don't get a lot of practice with it. But to build off of that, we still will be involved where there is that planning component. And I think that that's maybe really that big key piece is we'll still be involved in the Transit Commission because right now we're still planning the commission. We haven't operationalized it. When the commission actually gets moving and they start actually doing service delivery and we move into that time frame of say like 2023 or whatever that happens to look like, then we will actually be say taking that over, and that support would then come from our transit operational group versus the planning group. So that's kind of how we're going to be working through that. So that's why we'll still be providing that through those.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And question for Aaron, and you may not be able to answer this. The project management office kind of thought process, and if it's too early, let me know. As you can tell by some of the written questions and some of the previous discussion, I'm very interested in that. Just the vision around that is, would that include everything from the budgeting a project to managing it to executing it? Is that kind of the broader vision? And what I mean by that is if council comes up and has an idea to do X, is the thought process then to, instead of department, whatever that department is would the thought process be to come through that project management office to help, forecast what that budget would be and then run it through? Is that kind of the overall suite of things that you're looking at with that PMO?
Aaron, Swain. Yes, that is what we're looking at. At this point, we're looking at having a dedicated team. And at this point, it's not going to be a huge team. We're trying to work with the structure that we have, and having our municipal projects, whether it be capital, operational, and growth renewal projects, would be funneled through this team so that we have consistency in the delivery of our projects, which would include the planning and planning, construction, handoff, that sort of thing. So that is the intention. So we're going to go through that. It's unfortunate because we're in the process of putting that together. But as someone else had mentioned, the current structure is what we presented, but that doesn't reflect that change currently. So we're working on that.
Great, thank you, and sorry to drag you up here for that, but they're very exciting for me, and so very much looking forward to seeing how that executes. So good luck with that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Just a last very quick question.
Sure.
For Mike, great overview. Thank you for doing that. We often get asked, residents, how many staff do we have? All that sort of stuff. Can you just quickly hit on that one?
Yes, through Mayor Daniluk to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, the rest of council and public, we currently have 248 employees on payroll. Not all of those are full-time. We have approximately 168 FTEs, 9 part-time, and we have a lot of casuals. So that's the number. In the summer, that grows considerably.
Thank you. Councillor Tessier, you had a question?
Yep, I got a couple of questions. It's not a controversial question, just more or less need a bit better understanding of the org chart. From what I understand, it's changed drastically over the past few years from a traditional model to this model. Do you believe that the organization's top heavy? By that, I mean like director over manager over team lead, and then to the employees. Do you believe that the work is being carried out with the boots on the ground better from previous, like how the org chart was previously?
CEO Schwartz.
Yep, really good question through the mayor to Councillor Tessier and the rest of council. The short answer to that is yes. I'm not a big fan of the word empowered, but we've allowed people to own their work. And with that comes a sense of pride and a sense of accomplishment. The observation on the notion of top heavy, I can see how that comes across. One of the things we are consciously working on, and Aaron has really brought this outlook to us as well, is we realize that by continuing to add to the pointy end or continuing to add to this fire or to that fire is allowing organization to grow, but it's not solving the problems. We're missing the basic systems and structures. This organization has grown considerably over the last 5 years as the community has. And as a result, we've done a lot of that bolting on. So now we're stopping and going, okay, wait a minute here. Let's get some expertise managers in place that can map out the systems and structures that are required. And that will identify then what boots on the ground we need to hire. So it's, yeah, it can appear that way on the surface, but it's a method to a longer term plan.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a tough question, so thank you
Yeah, no,
for
good
explaining
question,
that.
good question.
And just second question, more or less, just an ease for us counselors during the strategic package. Can we just have this included so it's just easier to look back and forth from it? But
So Schwartz?
Absolutely, and there was a couple errors that we've already identified that we'll fix, and quite likely we'll have the structure for infrastructure updated, so that'll be in there as well, and you'll get the whole picture.
great, thank you.
Thank you, CEO Schwartz. Again, very informative and very helpful to council. Much appreciated. We're anticipating having a break around 7:30, 7:35, and we are pretty much smack on dab. So I will call a 5-minute recess at most 7 minutes, and we'll be back at approximately 7:45 or 7:47. Thank you. Council, administration, and guests online, we are back live, so I'll call the meeting back to order. And we'll continue with our agenda. So I will outline the process going forward rest of this evening and into tomorrow, if we need be. We had scheduled from 6 till 9, so I'll try and stay on till 9 o'clock tonight. We have a 4-hour session planned for tomorrow. If we go 9:15, we'll sort of play it by ear, but I don't want to see us much past that. We anticipated a 9 o'clock stop tonight and then 4 hours for tomorrow. So we'll try and stay on schedule. So what we're doing now is council question. We're now onto section 6 of the agenda. So the procedure will be as follows. At this point, with capital budget, council will ask any clarifying questions they need or answers they need clarification from. On those questions you submitted to administration, you got answers back that were published for the people of Beaumont. Start with that, and once all those questions and clarification have been answered, we'll then go into the capital budget, which is on hard copy. I have in front of me page 87. I'm not sure the actual copy in the published agenda. I think it's 89 or 92 or something. We'll find it. Mr. Blank will find us. Then we'll go through questions from council on the capital budget, starting with the renewals section, then growth, then utility. Okay. Are we okay with the procedure? Councilor Monkoff-Swain, you have a question?
Yeah, so thank you. I'm a little confused. Questions on the questions, I get that part. But then when you say questions on the capital budget, the operating budget, and then questions on the capital budget, my worry is that we start asking questions there, we're going to start leading into debate, so I'm just curious on why we're asking questions on those sections before we're actually diving into it, because I imagine that we're going to work our way through that. So just maybe just explain the thought process. I guess let me say it this way. If I'm asking a question on the capital budget and I get an answer, I'm going to want to dive into that and not wait another day to go into it. So I'm just curious the thought process behind that.
Ms. Winter, do you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Monkoff-Swain. I think the idea was to make sure that council had the opportunity to ask all the questions of clarification on each major component of the budget, starting with the capital budget. What Ms. Winter and I will be doing is capturing any potential amendment motions or subsequent motions, and then running those drafts by the member in question to make sure we've captured it correctly. We don't think we'll be able to do that in the span of this evening. So our hope was to just make sure to allow all members of council to really be thorough with any points of clarification on each component of the budget. And I believe, Mr. Mayor, I don't want to speak for you, he wanted to break it down even further by looking at the main components of each component. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
I think so. We had about 4 discussions last day or so about the agenda and going back and forth. So I think that's what we talked about.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is, if you have a motion about the capital and or operating budget or utility budget, you can have those, you'll have those motions drafted from yourself and go to Ms. Bourget or Ms. Winter by 10 a.m. tomorrow. We can then start debating those additions, deletions to the capital budget tomorrow operating as well as utility.
Okay, and just maybe then maybe I won't ask questions on that operating capital because my thought process is going to lead into like tonight, I should say. I'll wait until we get into the operations piece. Previously we've kind of gone through, not page by page, but we've gone through, okay, tomorrow we're going to get into the operating budget and we're going to look at those items. And I just want to confirm the process is, there are 10 things on this, changes to the operating budget for lack of a better term. Are there things in there that, if no one's got a concern with, then we don't need to sit and debate it. But are we going to go through those items like that? Is that still the plan?
Yeah, section by section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just to speak to the motions process, I recognize the need and value of trying to get those in advance. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. I want to wait to hear the debate before that. Now that may scare you, and what motions are going to come up. But I want to see where the budget is going and discussions going before making any motions to exclude this or exclude that. So I want to hear from administration first around their reasoning, and you got a one pager behind it. But for me to draft a motion that says, I don't want this or I want this. I want to wait before I guess tip my hand on that. So I'll work with it with you folks to make sure that that nothing comes too surprising. But I just have a hard time saying a motion to exclude this from the budget without hearing administration explain why. Right now I've just got a piece of paper and I can read into it. So hopefully that makes sense and doesn't throw off the process too much. I'll leave it there. So you got a response.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Munkoff-Swain, I don't think we're trying to limit council from asking for clarification from administration. We're trying to provide that opportunity. So when we say not to get into debate of the motions, we just want to try and organize the motions a little bit in case like 3 members of council want to make the same sort of amendment. We can consolidate, save a little bit of time, but this is council's opportunity to ask questions for clarification on any of the answers that were provided to council, as well as any components of the budget. So perhaps we're overthinking it a little bit. The idea here is just to support council and provide clarifying information, rationale, anything you need to sort of consolidate for yourself what amendments you would like to propose. I hope that helps.
You good? Okay. Councillor Miller, you have the floor for a question.
Thank you, Your Mayor. I think it helps, Ms. Vijaya. I am a little confused. To me, I submitted my questions and any clarifying or clarifications I needed. I would have already submitted that beforehand to get that back before tonight. I was more under the impression that we were to prepare, our motions in advance and be more prepared to debate or talk about the specifics in that aspect for each budget. So we can certainly go through the questions and see if there's anything that anyone else has, but I am a little confused. I was not under the impression we were going through and re-clarifying what we had already submitted. So I apologize if I seem a little confused
not at
on
all.
that.
Ms. Vijaya?
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I think there are a number of members of council who do have some further clarifying questions and would like to ask some questions of administration. So we just want to make sure we provide the opportunity to do that. And that way, when a councillor moves an amendment, they can be confident that they have the information they need to be certain about the amendment they wish to move it. And I'm sorry, I think in the explaining it, we maybe made it more complicated than it really is.
You good?
Yeah, that's totally fair. Thank you so much.
Councillor Van Newkirk?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm a little more confused than when I started. I'll go with the flow. I got a bunch of questions here. I'll just make sure I ask them when I think it's correct time to ask. I'll manage that on my end. The question for tomorrow and the next day, we have a very healthy complement of staff here logged in tonight. And thank you very much to them for that. Will they be joining for the next 2 days as well? Or should we try and get questions to them now because they might not be here tomorrow night or the next night? Just wondering who we're going to have to be able to ask questions to as this budget deliberation continues. Thank you.
CEO Schwartz.
Yeah, the plan is that most of the directors would be available for questions. We have left it up to them, but as we've seen in the past, they're interested and most likely be here. And if it happens that one is not, either the DCAO or we'll get the question answered right back to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's helpful. I just figured I would confirm that now. So just for clarification, actually you start. I'll just make sure I ask my questions. I'm not sure what order to ask them in, but we'll get there.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate that. Okay, so let's give this a go as we try to anticipate how to make this work. So I'll ask Council for any clarifying questions they may have or answers they want to clarify from what was presented to administration. They gave answers back in a written form that were published, as we all know. So are there any questions from Council that you got the answers back or you want clarification from Mr. DeBlanco on the capital budget questions you may have submitted? And I'll start with Councillor Tessier. You have the floor, please.
Sorry, are we talking just capital or?
Just capital right now, if you could, please.
All right, I'll skip my turn then and go to the back of the budget here.
Okay. Councillor Van Newkirk, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, I guess if we're starting with capital, I just wanted to make a comment up front that may lead to more question specific submitted question specific questions. So multiple questions were asked through you, Mayor, to administration. Multiple questions were asked by Council around how much would this cost? How much would that cost? How much would the other thing cost? And 200 questions in 5 days. Thank you to administration for turning that around to begin with. But one of the challenges that I see through this process is that we don't know how much things would cost. So, how much would it cost to do A? How much would it cost to do B? How much would it cost to do C? The common answer was, submit a motion or a notice of motion. I forget the wording is to figure out what that value was B because we don't have it now. So the challenge I see with that is that if I, as a councillor, would want to allocate funds to do one of those things through this budget, we're still going to be throwing darts at amounts. And just wondering if administration could comment on that a bit, because I think that'll be a challenging way to budget, yet we've done it in the past, I know, but just if administration could comment on that a bit.
CEO Schwartz.
Yes, thank you very much through Mayor Daniluk to Councillor Van Newkirk, the rest of Council. When we've done that in the past and just done these Class W budgets, it's come back to burn us big time. So what we're suggesting is if there's something that we want to explore a little bit further, I think one of the questions was typically what does it cost to asphalt this chunk of road? It's not that simple. So we want to be able to provide accurate estimates, and that takes resources. So in order to consume those resources, we need a direction from council. So you're right, it's a bit of a chicken egg thing, but that's why we're doing it. We're trying to be more accurate.
Yeah, just a follow up to that, and I respect that 100%. And it's frustrating to be able to throw a dart and try and get something done. So through this budget process, if we wanted to put money in here to put 10 of something in the community, we've asked the question, but there's been no response on how much that 10 would be. How would we include money to do that? So long as it's supported, how would we include that money to include 10 of these things into the community in this budget? I think we'd still have to throw a dart at a lump sum of money so administration can look at that and then come back. Or, do we look at it and administration comes back at spring budget? Like, what are you thinking there?
Yeah, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Dowler here in a second to give us the right answer, but that certainly is an option, is that we direct administration to obtain those design or those more accurate budgets and then bring it back. Spring could be an example. Mr. Dowler, you probably got a better way to handle
that. Not necessarily any better way, just the one thing I think to keep in mind is there's different funding mechanisms between a capital budget and an operating budget. Capital budget provides us a little bit more flexibility. So we're not necessarily tied to nailing down the final capital budget by the end of April in order to get tax notices out. So in the scenario that you are talking about, Councillor Van Newkirk, you know what? At the end of the day, it somewhat does come down to throwing a dart as a starting point. So whatever that, lands on, that's an amount we can set aside from a capital funding allocation perspective. And then the key part for me is administration coming back and reporting back to council on the progress made in moving that project forward and how we're doing in comparison to the budget that's been set. At any point in time, if we still want to pursue the full 10 of whatever council has directed administration.
People away from your families this evening and council as well too, rather than wait and try and fix it and be rushed for time. I'm going to declare a recess until we begin at 5 o'clock tomorrow to re-get our technology link up properly and make sure we're not here just spinning our wheels unintentionally. Technology is great when it works, when it doesn't work, it causes difficulty. So we'll call a recess of the meeting until tomorrow at 5 and we'll reconvene then, okay?